Hi and welcome back to Everything I Know About Chronic Insomnia. I did say that the previous video would be the last one, but since then I've remembered a bunch of things that people ask me that I wanted to address in this sort of bonus video, an addendum video if you like. So I'm just going to go through a couple of points here. Some of them are new points, some of them just kind of underscore things I mentioned in previous videos but give a little more information. So it's a bit scattershot, this video, whereas the other ones had a theme. This is just a bunch of things that have come up since, or people have mentioned or asked about. So yeah, I'm just going to go through those one by one. So first of all, this is a bit of a weird one. Crying helps. I know that probably doesn't sound very positive. It's like, oh my god, I've got to be in tears before this gets any better. Well, in a way, yes. Crying is a form of release. How many times have we heard it that you feel better after a good cry? Now, what I would say to any men listening to this, that whole stigma about boys don't cry, just bin that right off the bat. That's not going to be helpful. I've had times where I've been at a very low ebb, or times when I've been struggling and I've actually kind of engineered some crying. And it has helped. It does give you that nervous release. And if your insomnia is coming about because your nervous system is wired and you don't know how to switch off, and maybe a lot of the things we talked about previously are affecting you, then you need that release. And it's not the only kind of release. We talked about exercise, didn't we? I talked about Qigong, the sort of energy work system from China that I've used a lot. I definitely recommend that, by the way. Like I said before, that holds great things for you if you're coming from a world of constant screens, notifications, social media updates, Twitter, your phone constantly pinging, Netflix binge watching, all of that stuff. Qigong will be a lifesaver. But yeah, back to crying. That is definitely something that I've found can help. What I do, I tend to have a couple of songs in a playlist that I know elicit that reaction, and the reason that they elicit that reaction is not really important. That'll be different for everybody, but whatever it is for you that kind of gets you in that way, it doesn't have to have words. It can be just purely, I'm one of those people that resonates more with sound than lyrics, so for me it's often very instrumental work. But yeah, crying is definitely something that can help. You may find there's actually quite a lot to release, especially, as I say, if you're a man and you're not really accustomed to this sort of thing. And I mentioned before about like insomnia being, or probably being, unhealed trauma. So yeah, crying is definitely something that can help you in your life, particularly with trauma and maybe the insomnia that's arising from it. One thing I did want to point out in a previous video, when I talked about everybody's sleep is different and not everybody sleeps the way that you think they do. Everybody has perfect sleep. It isn't like that. The famous example, at least here in the UK, is Margaret Thatcher, whatever you thought of her, slept for 4 hours a night, apparently. And obviously she had one of the most stressful jobs in the world and lived to, I don't know exactly, but into her 80s certainly. So, that just tells you, the next time somebody tells you you have to have 8 hours a night without question, without failure, well, there's plenty of people that don't do that. And I think I mentioned previously my dad was one who doesn't get anywhere near that. He gets maybe a few hours and then he kind of drifts in and out. Somehow that's not a problem for him. But yeah, it's worth maybe seeking out a few more examples of people that don't sleep for a solid 8 hours a night like we often think people do when we have difficult sleep. I talked before about screens and social media and how a lot of the focus these days is on our attention, and that's really the commodity that the big firms are vying for and fighting each other over. It is our undivided, constant attention, and that's an absolute ticking time bomb in terms of mental health. We're already seeing a great number of people, particularly youngsters, who have huge problems with attention, retention, with anxiety, because they are just addicted to their phones And if it's not phones, then it's PlayStations. If it's not PlayStations, it's the latest Netflix box set, which of course is released in such a way that you're encouraged to binge watch it and everything. Anyway, part of this, of course, is social media. Think about whether quitting social media could work for you. It did for me. Not saying it's a one size fits all. Maybe you've got a million friends and it's the only way to keep up with certain people from the other part of the world or whatever, but it's worth considering. Again, just going back to that idea of just reduce the number of things that go beep, that constantly cry out for your attention. If all the things that demand our attention these days, all the notifications, all the subscriptions and everything, if they took the form of a person that constantly nagged you and wanted your attention, you would go mad. But somehow, with it being electronic devices and digital media, we have accepted it. So, yeah, I can't stress enough the importance of winding this all down a bit and having a quieter life. And you will benefit, because I talked before about getting more out in nature and things, doing some qigong, having quiet time with no screens. It's only going to help. So maybe that works for you, but as I say, it's not a one size fits all. When you are having a bad period, remember to zoom out. Now, I did mention this in a previous video, but it's so important that I want to underline it again. Zoom out, and what I mean by that is when we are struggling, is the mind in its sort of panic management mode goes into a state of, well, this is how life is, this is how life always is, and we forget that maybe last week or last month it actually wasn't like this, or may not be in a week's time. So it's very important that when you do enter bad periods, to zoom out and almost see yourself from above, and like see the different versions of yourself, the version last week, the version last year, and a potential version next week, next year, and just see that it fluctuates. It isn't always like you think it is right now. Right now the alarm bells are ringing, but that doesn't mean that it's always like that. The next thing, I didn't discuss this in videos, but it's a really interesting point, and it's a bit of a controversial one, but what does insomnia give you, and what are the reasons to cling on to it? This is something that I got into through the philosophy channels. It wasn't just about insomnia, but some of the teachers I follow were asking people this question: whatever their problem was, whatever their trauma was, what is a good reason to keep it? And that isn't something, again, that we are ever asked in the West. It's not it doesn't fall into the whole medical paradigm. But just explore whether your insomnia is giving you anything. As much as you resist it, as much as you wish it weren't here, be very aware that the mind is capable of betting on both horses. And the mind will do whatever it takes to try to give you some safety. And if that means deluding you, lying to you, there's all kinds of really fascinating research out there about what the mind can do just to keep you alive, basically, or so it believes is the reason. So yes, you're raging against insomnia, but explore whether there's actually reasons to cling to it. Has it become your personality? Are you accustomed to wheeling it out at any given situation and in any given conversation as a reason not to do something, as a reason not to go somewhere? Was there a time when you were younger that you were sort of oppressed and you weren't welcome or something, and therefore now your insomnia is taking that out of the foreground, but continuing that narrative because it gives you a reason not to go and do things? It's a very complex area. There are videos by teachers out there that explore this kind of thing. As I say, check out some of the videos from the teachers I mentioned in the philosophy video. But yeah, it is a new one, as I say. It's not something that it goes down easily. When I first came across it, I was like, what the fuck do you mean? What do I get out of it? It takes everything from me. I hate it. But it may also get me off the hook for certain things that I'd rather not do, and it therefore becomes a convenient excuse. And as we said earlier, the mind will give you what you ask of it to some degree. So yeah, just maybe explore that. I did mention this previously, but it can't really be repeated often enough. Insomnia is possibly, I would say probably, a manifestation of unhealed trauma. I've said throughout this video series that insomnia is not usually an original cause of your an original symptom. It's a symptom of something else, even if that something else is not known. So that's really interesting, and it's also very freeing because it makes you realize that if you can get to the heart of what's going on, and it could be decades, in your past, something that happened, something that you've suppressed but is now coming to the fore in the shape of insomnia, then you can heal that and potentially heal your insomnia. So don't, if you can, and if you think this resonates with you, don't think of insomnia as like just completely isolated. There's almost certainly stuff going on underneath that maybe you are just so used to suppressing and not giving any thought to. To give you an example, I was badly bullied at school, and for many years I thought I'd basically got away with that and it didn't affect me. I wished those people only well, I had rational explanations for why they did what they did. I basically explained it away, and I later came to see that that wasn't the whole truth. Without boring you with my life story, I had some therapy and stuff, and I saw that there were things going on, and certain behavioral patterns that I exhibit that basically come from those days. So yeah, just be wary of thinking that there's nothing going on. Maybe there isn't for you, but there possibly may be. I did talk about sleep restriction in sleep hygiene, and I mentioned what a horrible phrase it is. The very idea that you sleep badly and then somebody comes along and says, well, you know what, the answer to that is spend even less time in bed. There is science behind it, but it's very scary. What I would say is the general idea behind sleep restriction is sound. You reduce the number of hours in bed to retrain your mind that is the time that it has to sleep, rather than spending 11 hours in bed and sleeping for 4 of them, and the rest of it is just struggling or laying there wishing you were asleep, because I've definitely been there. So what I would say is when you're in a good phase, get up early if you can, when you're doing well. If you're not doing well, I don't have any time for sleep restriction at all. It's just the worst thing. Remember, the priority is your safety. And how do you think your nervous system is going to be if you're wired from a poor night and then somebody says, oh yeah, you also need to get up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and have only 4 or 5 hours in bed? It's just going to, like, I can't even imagine what that must be like. So yeah, but in a good period, if you're having a few nights in a row of sleeping well, get up early if you can, just to start the process. One more thing is poor sleep may not be the reason you feel bad. I've had this many times where I'm so used to telling myself that I sleep badly, and I'm so used to attributing pretty much anything I'm going through to poor sleep, that it doesn't really take regard of what my sleep is actually like at that moment. So I had a night quite recently where I think I slept all right. I think I slept enough, but I'd taken half a pill, and what that can do is obviously it can leave you a bit groggy, and if you're groggy, what it can do is sort of make you very irritable, and therefore you slip into this sort of automatic way of thinking that I feel irritable, I feel low, I feel groggy. Oh, I must have slept bad. And actually, well, no, it's because you had a tablet, So it's so easy to get into this like way of thinking that there's only one explanation. It has to be poor sleep, everything going on in your life. Sometimes it may not be the culprit. And finally, if there's anything else, anything you want to ask me, just put it in the comments. I'll do my best. I may not always be super quick to reply, and I may not have the answer, but if there is anything else that you want to ask, or something I've raised in these videos that you want further clarification on or anything, or if you want to share your tips, I'd love to hear other people's views on this and what works for you, and maybe how you got through this. Don't hold back. So once again, thank you for joining me on this video series, and I wish you all the best with your sleep.